So I'm setting a timer because I'm known to do 18-hour filibusters. Non-stop. Jacob Rees, Mog Icharata. So we're going to need this banner up there. If we can just bring the Bill of Rights one up there and we'll just show people what it is. There's another banner we're going to unravel. But can I just say to everyone before I actually start this, how many of you, a little bit of interaction, I don't do scripted, and I certainly don't do presentations, right? So the question is, how many of you believe you're British? Put your hand up if you think you're British. Right, now put your hand up if you think you're English. Right, so I'm seeing a couple of dual hands there as well, right? But there's many people here who believe they're English. Let me make sure I fully explain the first thing. The first thing is the Acts of Union were put in place, and by the way, it was the Scots that actually asked for them because they bankrupted themselves in South America, right? The Scots actually asked to join with England, and the reason they did was because they was bankrupt, right? That's the reason they did it. 20% of their wealth had gone, and the area that they invaded, basically, and colonised was a place called the Darien Gap, right? And the basis is the indigenous population fought back, and over a set period in late 1600s, they had to come back with their cap in their hand. And I'm not having a go at the Scots. The normal Scots, the Highlanders, had nothing to do with it. It was the ruling class that did that, right? It was the people that invested in that, and they bankrupted the country. What happened after that was there was something called the Acts of Union, 1706, 1707. They were two separate acts, and they were a treaty. It was not a law, even though it was enrolled into what we now call the House of Commons or Parliament. The major point is it was a treaty. And there is something else called the law of treaties, which I'm not going to go into detail with, but what I will tell you is this. The law of treaties tells you, quite simply, that the treaty itself is sovereign to sovereign, not sovereign to subject, right? You are all subjects of England and Wales. Wales has a common law jurisdiction. It was brought into England in 1536. It was nothing to do with us. If they want to be completely independent, I've got no issue with that whatsoever. Scotland is a separate jurisdiction. It is called Roman law. It is completely different to the English common law. And the reason why it is, and I'll give you an example, under the English common law and under the English constitution, a one-liner can say, you are forbidden from doing this. Except Roman law does the opposite. It lists everything that you can do, and if it's not on that list of laws, then it's illegal. It's the complete opposite system. It is the European model. It is Napoleonic. Some say there's other elements to it, but again, it is Roman. The first form of communism was Roman in nature. They didn't call it communism, but there was two classes of people. There were the rulers, and then there was you. The Anglo-Saxon English system, you could elect your king, not like we currently got today. You could elect your king. There was mobility. You could be a peasant and you could be elected king. Where's that gone? It's gone because we today have got what I call, and if you look at history and folklore of Europe, what's known as a dog king. That means that king no longer represents you. He's not there anymore to protect you. That is the Constitution of England. That we have a separation of powers, and it's crucially important that people understand that. Some people get that wrong. David Starkey got it completely wrong. That's because he's not a legal historian, he's just a historian. He talks about kings and queens and going back 1,000 years. I'm not looking at that. I look at the law, the Constitution, and what is written. So over here we've got the English Bill of Rights. How many people here think that doesn't exist because you're told we haven't got a written constitution. Are they words written on that banner? Because that is the part of the English constitution. It is there, it is your inalienable rights. We passed to Scotland in 1689 the claim of right because they asked for it, right? So we stuck our hands out, we shook their hands, we took back control of England. Who did that? The Prince of Orange. Where did he land? Brixham in Devon. Why is November the 5th an important date in our lifetimes? You know why that's so important? Everyone says it's because Guy Fawkes tried to burn down Parliament. That's not the date. The date is November the 5th, 1688, because that's when the Prince of Orange landed in Brixham, Devon, with a 3,000-man army as part of his army, who were English exiles to Holland to take this country back from the tyrannous king. That was the true story of the English Bill of Rights. There was a Declaration of Rights. The Declaration of Rights and the Declaration of Reasons are still enrolled in the Houses of Parliament. Do you know why? Because it was the original contract between the subjects of England. The subjects of England and that crown, who took two oaths, the Coronation Oath and Act and the Accession Oath. Two oaths. Does everyone know what serious offence it is that if you breach that oath? If you breach that oath, it is akin to treason. We used to chop people's heads off for doing it. Kings in the past have apologised to the people, the English, for perjuring their oaths. And yet today, all of them, including police constables, perjure their oaths. And I'm not talking about getting a conviction for perjury if you tell a lie in front of a judge and a jury. I'm talking about perjuring your oath. That oath system is part of our ancient usage rights. How do I know that? Because we're in the High Court now, talking to judges and telling them what our constitution is. So let me just make sure everyone is aware. The English Bill of Rights declares a number of things, and it came from a convention parliament. What does that mean? A 17-day period in our history where Lord John Somers and others put together the Bill of Rights. They were existing rights, and some of them are new rights. But the right to keep and bear arms is still your right today. It cannot be repealed. And the reason it can't be repealed is because the English Bill of Rights at Section 2 states that they cannot never repeal it. The English Bill of Rights of 1688-89, again, 4 times it says within that document, enrolled in the House of Lords and in Parliament itself, still on parchment paper, what does it actually say? Twice it says forever, and twice it says in all time in this kingdom, all time to come. So 4 separate phrases. A.V. Dicey actually wrote another book, and where he said there's certain phrases that if they're within them documents and it is a constitutional statute, it can never be repealed, right? It's ignored. It's ignored by the judiciary, who are corrupt to the core. It is ignored by Parliament. Parliament tells you they're sovereign. They are not sovereign. There's a reason why they're not sovereign. Because them documents, constitutional statutes, tell them they are not sovereign. The people are sovereign. You are sovereign. Your members of Parliament should be, as I am, a constitutionalist. Parliament is limited by the Constitution. That is factual. They never teach you that in school. And do you know when they removed it? Do you know when they removed it from school curriculums? Do you know when they removed it from the bar exams? So judges don't know what your constitution is. People like me go around the country teaching people what the constitutional rights is and what the common law is. But what did they do? How did they do it? They took it out of the curriculum in the early 1970s. Anyone here guess why they did that? European Communities Act 1972 was unlawful, it was unconstitutional, it was ultra-vires. And the reason they removed it is because they knew it affected every one of your sovereignty. There was an argument with Ted Heath, and he literally stopped everyone understanding exactly what the Constitution meant. They kept their mouth shut. They committed treason. To subvert the English Constitution is to commit treason against the English. I am an Englishman. When I talk of my country, I talk of England. Britain is an island. We share this island. It's called Great Britain for a reason. It contains 3 nation states that are independent of each other. The Acts of Union created a political union. Political unions are a stepping stone to the New World Order. It started a long time ago. Does anyone know what the Act of Settlement is, 1701? Does anyone know what Chapter 4 says? This party stands for heritage. What is your heritage? The English Bill of Rights is your heritage. Where does it say it? It says it in the Act of Settlement of 1701, Chapter 4. What does it say? The laws of England are your birthright. You are the people that hold the eternal flame of freedom. And your job is to pass that eternal flame of freedom on to the next generation. Don't let us be that generation that fails. Don't ever fail England. The Act of Settlement is crucially important. They've repealed parts of it. They shouldn't have done. It's constitutional. How many people out here actually understand that a 3-line whip is unlawful and it is a coded system? Everyone should understand it's a code. That's why they call it 1, 2, and 3-line whip. No one can whip a member of Parliament. A member of Parliament stands there in his own conscience for his constituents, not for the King, not for the Lords, but for you as individuals, to represent you, not a political party, you and your area and your local customs. That is their job. How many of them know that? None of them. Why? Because they've all got degrees coming out of them. I'm not very big on degrees, I'm afraid. They've got degrees coming out of their backsides about politics and all of the nonsense that they come out with. None of them know anything about the Constitution. Nigel Farage knows nothing about the Constitution. We call him Benedict Arnold. Does anyone know the history of America? Does anyone know who betrayed George Washington? I'll tell you, it was a man called Benedict Arnold who took 10,000 guineas off the British to betray him, right? That's why they called him a traitor. Do you know where he's buried now? In Battersea. Battersea. And he's buried in an unmarked grave because he's a traitor, because everyone turned their backs on him. The Americans turned their backs. The Canadians turned their back because they knew what treason meant. And treason is when you betray your nation. We should never betray this nation. The Act of Settlement is an extremely important constitutional document. So important it tells you what the hierarchy of the kings and the peers and what they can and can't do and get away with, right? It's just as important as the English Bill of Rights. What we do is go around the country and talk to people and tell them, how many people here think that the British stopped slavery? How many people think the British stopped slavery? Right, it's a lie. Everything you've been told is a lie, right? From get-go. Do you know who stopped slavery? The English. Do you know why? Because we were slaves. Our ancestors were slaves, taken as slaves from Cornwall. Go and read a book, The Adventures of Thomas Pallow. Go and read a book about the stolen village of Baltimore in Southern Ireland. They took the complete whole village and they was enslaved. And then we built our army and we built our navy and we protected our people. Can you see that happening now? No. Why not? Do you know they took the Irish and they took the English to them slavers in America? White people were taken as slaves. They don't teach you that part in history, do they? They don't tell you that anymore. How did the English defeat slavery? The main case, and there's many of them, is called Stuart versus Somerset, 1762. And from that one line that come from the barrister, not the judge, guess what he said? The barrister stood up and said, this black shouldn't be a slave. You cannot be a slave and breathe the air of England. It is too pure for any slave to breathe. Free the black. And that was the shot that was heard around the world. Because from then, blacks come to England to be free. They went to a place and flocked to a place called St. Giles' Square in London, right? Who looked after them? We did. White people looked after them. When they was begging on the street and didn't know what to do, didn't know where they come from, we was the people who looked after them. And now we have been betrayed. We've been betrayed by black people who have been conned into believing that this whole system is about the English being racist. We are not the racists. The racism comes from the British Empire. The British are the ones who did this to you. The same people that told you all, told your families, told your kids that the COVID jab was safe and effective are the same people telling you you haven't got a constitution, and they're the same people telling you you're British, not English. How many of you trust them same people? That same media. And you get people like me to go all over the country. Me and David actually fronted off 200 riot police in Hyde Park, right? And I stood there with a copy of the English Bill of Rights and said the English Bill of Rights is in full force. And they still come through me. They had to pull me back because I was going to get arrested. So they pulled me out of the way. And do you know what a police officer said? Not today, it's not. Right? We're the only group of people currently taking King Charles III and 4 police officers under universal jurisdiction to court. We've already been in the High Court. We've already been through the process. There's something out there which people should know. We stopped torturing people in England in 1640. By the way, people, they used to rendition the English to the Scots until 1708. So they used to hand over Englishmen to be tortured in Scotland, right? Let me just say this to you. We have now got something on our statute books, and it's called the Criminal Justice Act, 1988, Section 134, called torture. Anyone heard of it? Well, you should have done, because it protects you. Under universal jurisdiction, we're bringing a case in Texas against King Charles III for torture. Because every single police constable in this country is a crown servant. We've already had that confirmed by the High Court. So we are bringing criminal indictments against the police for torturing us on the streets of London. One of our members, 23 years old, tortured by police officers, completely passive, right? They're all going to end up, and they will be, indicted in America. Do you think it hasn't happened before? Sir Vince Cable. Everyone heard of him? Did you know he got done for torture? Did you know that the Nigerians, he was on the board of Royal Dutch Shell. He was on the board and the board ordered 11 Nigerians to be tortured and murdered by the president of Nigeria because they was eco-warriors trying to protect their village. That board ordered the president to kill him, and he did. The family of the Nigerians tried to bring him to the courts in the High Court of England, and the High Court of England, being British, threw it out, wouldn't have it. Sir Vince Cable, he said, sir, you can't be doing that. The family said, fair enough, we'll take it under universal jurisdiction. And they took it to New York, and they got a massive, massive out-of-court settlement, right? It's called Parliament's dirty secret. They never tell you that, do they? People like me get up on stage and tell you the truth. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is, the problem is the British. Why is it a problem? Because the New World Order needs a way of controlling nation states. I'm not talking about nationalism, I'm talking about nationism. You can call it something else if you want, and that's called England first, right? The basis of what they do is they create a union because they know via the English Bill of Rights and our many, somewhere like 15 separate documents, they know that they cannot independently interfere with a nation. So what is it that they do? They create a union that sits above it, and then they get foreigners come in, control the union. That's what they did with the USSR. That's what they did with the European Union. That's in 1860, that's what they've done in the United States of America. The battles in America was about a confederacy versus a Roman federal centralised system. Go and look up the real history of what happened. It was not about slavery, it was about control. That is what the southern states fought about, right? And when you know the real history, and when you go out and get invited into Texas and talk at Texas events, which I do, and I talk about England, one cultured people in the whole of America are more English than English. You know who they are? The Texans. Do you know why? Because in 1836, they adopted the English common law and the English constitution as part of their state constitution. And that's why we can bring that case in Texas, right? So everyone should understand that you were free, and you were free for a reason. Our ancestors fought and died for these rights. The British in 1819 attacked us at Peterloo. 70,000 of us stood there unarmed. Men, women and children. Who drew their cutlasses and attacked? Who drew their cutlasses and attacked us with a cavalry? Charged their horses into children, men, women and children, and hacked them down. Killed them. 19 of them died. The British did that. And then people come from Manchester, they was working class. All they was asking for was the vote. And then after that, they started, bit by bit, taking your rights. They repealed part of the English Bill of Rights unlawfully. They buried it in legislation. They didn't tell any of you that they did that. How can you take it back? How can you free Palestine? How can you erase Israel from the map? Right? Do you want me to tell you? Void the Acts of Union. The Balfour Agreement would have no authority whatsoever, nor would the Palestine Mandate of 1923. If you want real solutions, you want legal solutions, you want legal minds that are constitutionalists. I've heard some of the comments today from this stage. 90% of it I agree with, 10% I don't. But you must remember one thing. You must remember one thing. We are English first. We are English. We are not British. They brought in 2 Acts of Parliament. The first was the British Nationality Act of 1947. The second was the British Nationality Act of 1981. Do you know what the British Nationality Act of 1981 did? It erased your identity, which is against your indigenous rights of this country as Englishmen, Welshmen, Scottish men and Irish men. Do you know who the last person who did that? His name was Joseph Stalin. He was the Commissar of the USSR. He was in charge of their identities. He took their identities and replaced it with Soviet. Soviet is no different to the term British when it is used in the way that it has been used. What's the other thing about being called British? Do you want me to give you the answer? You ain't got no rights. It's an Englishman who's got rights. It's a Scotsman who's got rights. It's a Welshman who's got rights. It's an Irishman who's got rights. The British have no rights. Because when you don't stand up and you tell people, I'm British, it's the biggest psyop they have ever completed. I could go into detail about who's doing it and why they're doing it, but I can't go into detail in a 30-minute. Anyone who's listened to a lot of my podcasts and talks before on the Constitution, I'll go through every one of these documents. I'll show you every part of it. I'll show you the receipts. How dare they tell you you haven't got a written Constitution? What does that look like? Words? It's not words. Are you really that stupid? You're not stupid. You're being conned. And you're being conned by a group of people that sit at a really high level in unions, and what they do, and I'm not talking about workers' unions and workers' rights, I'm talking about the people that know that they can't interfere with a nation or its constitution. So instead what they do is they sit at the union level. No different to the EU. We are unique in the same as the USSR, that disillusioned the USSR literally by putting a signature to a page and saying, that's it, it's gone. Straight away, the USSR had gone. It completely went, right? The same thing can happen to the power that resides with the British regime, right? The British establishment, the British ruling class. Let me just finish. I don't know how long I've got left. 5 minutes, right. 5 minutes, I'm going to give you a quick story. There's so much more I could have gone on, but I can't. Right, let me just ask you a quick question. Does everyone understand your right as a jury and a jury member? You do understand that the Chief Justices now are trying to completely erase juries. You understand that they're installing what's known as administrative law. Right, so in other words, they're taking away your common law rights and your constitutional rights by installing the same type of thing that they've got in the European Union, and it's one of the reasons why Scotland is so aligned with Europe, because it's virtually the same legal system. Let me just explain this to you. I'm going to explain to you why you're sovereign. Apart from Parliament, when obviously it's prorogued and it all goes, MPs are not allowed to call themselves MPs because they're not members of Parliament. And it goes back to the Crown. When it goes back to the Crown, the reason why the MPs have to give you back your vote, because they only borrow it, is because it is you who's sovereign. The Commons is different to the Lords. The government is different because it's part of the Crown. Parliament belongs, believe it or not, to the Crown. It belongs to the King of England, right? But let's talk about the court system. If any one of you ended up in the court and you're standing in front of 12 good men and true, and they've taken an oath, are you all aware that that jury, and by the way, the judge never tells them this, the barristers would never work again if they told them this, but this is the law of the land, that a jury, once sworn in, operate under their own conscience. They are the only people in England, and uniquely in the world, that can nullify all law. They can nullify the common law, that's judges' law. They can nullify the King's law, and they can nullify parliamentary law. That when they stand up and say not guilty, that's it. There's no appeal. They can try and appeal a misdirected jury, but you cannot appeal a not guilty verdict. By the way, they swayed that one against us slightly as well. But without going into detail, if you, as members of the jury, can nullify all law, what does that make you? It makes you sovereign. And you should remember that that comes from England. It comes from our ancestors. And that right to nullify them laws, you should be passing on to your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren. We carry that eternal flame of freedom. We carry the eternal flame of freedom. And we was given it to pass to our children. Nowhere, anywhere in the English Constitution does it mention your colour or your race. Nowhere. Understand, the English are not racist, but we will stand up for our nation, and we will stand up for our laws, our common law. The common law of England is the number one social justice system in the world, which is why the communists seek to defeat it. Karl Marx once said, every communist revolution has been shipwrecked on the rock of England. Why didn't he say Britain? Because he meant England. So again, for 30 minutes, I just want to ask at the end of this, how many of you now believe you are English, Scottish, Irish or Welsh and not British? Because you always get an increase. I was in a cab in Durham a Nigerian black cab driver. We spoke for 20 minutes where he was talking about being British. By the time I got out of a 20-minute cab ride, I said, "Are you English or are you British?" And he said, "I'm English." And that was it. So I want everyone to understand, you have a constitution and you need to stand up for it. Thank you. Thank you. And you can find us on the Full English Show on Rumble. I've been banned from YouTube, banned from Twitter, banned from Facebook, banned from PayPal. I'm really grateful for this opportunity.